So let's then go through all the way through. We start at the lips, and the lips are covered by stratified squamous epithelium. It rolls over into the mouth. Your entire mouth is lined with stratified squamous epithelium. And it actually goes down into the oral pharynx and partway down to the esophagus. When you think about the foods we eat, popcorn, potato chips, real shearing type foods, they will tear off multiple layers of those cells. And if we just had simple squamous or simple columnar epithelium in the mouth, it would tear those off and you'd be right down into the submucosa and probably bleeding. So the stratified squamous epithelium serves as a nice protective barrier. It extends down into the oral pharynx, the laryngopharynx, and partway down to the esophagus. Within the oral cavity, you have the tongue, which I argue is the strongest muscle in the body. Some people don't agree with that, but I got into discussion with Thomas Samuel and a couple of people. They think the masseter muscle is probably stronger, but the tongue is quite strong, if you think about it. You have salivary glands, you have parotid salivary glands up here, just anterior and inferior to the ears. You have sublingual, which are right under your tongue. If you've ever yawned sometimes and see a jettison of saliva coming out, as you yawn, you're squeezing the sublingual glands and they squirt out their saliva. And then the submandibulars sit down here in the lower part of the jaw. Those all are under the control of sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And they all produce varying concentrations of saliva. We then pass into the oral pharynx, past the larynx, and down into the esophagus. And the esophagus is basically just a food tube. It is made up primarily of smooth muscle. At least the bottom third is smooth muscle. The top third is skeletal muscle. And then the middle third is both skeletal and smooth. From there you pass down into the stomach. Comes down behind the liver. The esophagus is on the posterior wall of the thoracic cavity. It runs right next to the aorta. And then you enter into the stomach, and you can see right here the stomach is positioned underneath the diaphragm. The diaphragm would be right about here. And so once the food is in the stomach, it goes from being highly alkaline to the stomach, which is extremely acidic. The pH of the stomach is about 1 or 2. The stomach produces pure hydrochloric acid. And the hydrochloric acid does several things. One, it begins the breakdown of the proteins. It also acts to activate an enzyme called pepsin. And we'll talk about that a little later. And within the stomach there are ridges called rugae that basically allow the stomach to expand. When we're in the lab, we'll look at the model of the stomach. Once you pass through the stomach, then there is what is called a true sphincter right here. And a sphincter is just a band or ring of smooth muscle that constricts down and will not allow food to pass from the stomach into the duodenum. When that sphincter relaxes, then a small bolus of food will pass into the duodenum, which is right here. The duodenum is about 8 inches in length and is the first portion of the small intestine. That's where all the digestive enzymes come into it. And from there on through the rest of the small intestine, which you can see right here, and the entire small intestine is somewhere around 22 feet in length. So you can imagine once it enters into the small intestine, it's going to be a relatively slow process to transit through there, and that's what allows for the absorptive time. Once you pass through the small intestine, then you come into the cecum. The cecum is right here. It's just a blind sac. The connection from the ileum is right about here. And then you go up. This is the ascending colon. You make a left-hand turn, and this turn is called the hepatic flexure. It is right below the liver, turn medially, pass across to the opposite side, and on that side, that's called the splenic flexure. Your spleen sits right about here. So you turn downward into the descending colon. The last segment is the sigmoid colon. It's sort of S-shaped, and then it passes into the rectum. And the rectum, again, is a storage tube where the fecal mass is stored before it's released out through the anal canal. So now let's look at these in more detail.